In 2012, a studio in Warsaw handed the most important thing it would ever make to a man who had never directed a game in his life. His name was Konrad Tomaszkiewicz, and he was 29 years old. He had come up through the studio from the very bottom, a game tester who talked his way onto the design floor and made himself into one of the people who built the games. As a boy, in gray communist Poland, he had loved games so much that he typed them into a computer by hand, out of a magazine, line by line, because it was the only way he had to play them. Now, they were making him the director of the whole thing. And the whole thing was a bet that could sink the company. Here is where the bet came from. In late 2011, a studio called Bethesda had put out Skyrim. Skyrim was an open world, one enormous country you could walk into and simply get lost in. You could follow a road to a town nobody had sent you to, climb a mountain just because it was there, and lose 100 hours doing it. Bethesda had spent the better part of a decade, one game after another, learning how to build worlds like that. And when Skyrim came out, every studio that made this kind of game looked up and understood the bar was somewhere new now. In Warsaw, CD Projekt Red looked up too. They had built two well-liked games out of a Polish fantasy series called The Witcher, but both of them the old way, made out of separate walled-off areas you moved between. They had never built an open world in their lives, and their tools were not built for one, and they decided that their first one would be bigger than the one the masters had just built. They could have scaled it back and made something safe. Instead, they set out to make the greatest open world role-playing game anyone has ever made, and to bet the studio on it. Tens of millions of dollars of their own money, with no outside publisher behind them and no net if it went wrong. The tools to run a world that big did not fully exist either, so they were building the engine and the game at the same time, the one changing week to week under the other. That was the thing they put in the hands of the 29-year-old. The way he saw it, on a game this size, you either ruled the world with it the moment it came out, or you did not exist at all. And a world that big comes with a problem of its own. One person cannot build it. They cannot write all of it, or even hold the whole of it in their head at once. And the easy way out, the way plenty of studios would have taken, was to let the computer do the filling. You build a system that spits out side quests on its own. Go here, kill 10 of these, carry 5 of those back, and you smear that thin gruel across the whole map until it looks full. CD Projekt tried the honest way instead. Early on, the first times people played through the open world, it came back feeling empty, and the fix they chose was the hard one. Instead of turning a machine loose to fill the space, they placed all of it hand by hand, every encounter and every small story one at a time. That was Konrad's call, that the whole world would be made by hand, and it is what pushed the Quest team alone to double. The team, all told, started the project at 80 people. By the end of it, there were 200. He was not going to author this thing himself. He was going to build the village that could. The team had one rule, and it was simple. No fetch quests. The first thing a new quest designer got told walking in the door was exactly that. We do not fetch quests here. Every quest, even the small ones, even the ones that started out looking like a go kill a monster, had to be a real story, with a turn in it, something that left you a little changed at the end of it. A player's time had to be worth spending. Each designer took a chunk of the world and made it their own, and threw away 10 ideas for every one that made it in. Between them, they wrote close to 500,000 words of dialogue, and the world they made out of all that was really several places, each with its own weather and its own soul. Novigrad was a free city the size of a real one, crowded and crooked, where money bought anything and centuries of history pressed down out the stones. Far to the north lay Skellige, a scatter of cold islands with long ships in the water and cliffs going straight up out of a gray sea. And then there was Velen, the war-torn swamp at the dark heart of the game, and Velen was, quietly, made out of his own country. It was the real Polish countryside, shaped around one feeling. The kind a place is left with after a war has already passed through it and taken everything worth having. You can see the whole of that in one quest, the one people still talk about, the war-broken lord they called the Bloody Baron. On paper, it is a missing persons case, a man asking you to find his wife and a daughter. What it turns into is the story of a drinking, grief-wrecked man who drove his own family away, and a child, lost before it was ever born, that comes back to the house as a small monster. There is no villain in it and no clean way through. It is that whole ruined country folded down into a single household. The man who designed it doubted it the entire time he was building it, and only let himself believe it worked when the first people outside the studio played it and told him it did. And it was costing him. He had always been the one who took care of himself, the fit one, the sporty one. Somewhere in the middle of making The Witcher 3, he started smoking. By the account of the people who were there, these were the hardest years of his life. He was learning to direct on the hardest thing the studio has ever tried, and he got a lot of it wrong before he got it right. But somewhere around the halfway mark, it came together. They had meant to release it early in 2015 and had to pull the date back. In the December before it shipped, they were still sitting on something like 5,000 documented bugs. And then, on the 19th of May 2015, after more than 3 years, The Witcher 3 went out into the world. It landed like almost nothing before it. The reviews came back at the very top of the scale, some of them perfect, the kind of scores a studio waits its whole life for and mostly never gets. It sold 4 million copies in 2 weeks. The impossible bet had come in. A studio out of Poland, on its first attempt at an open world, with an engine it had been inventing as it went, had walked onto the ground the giants owned and built something that stood with the best of it, and by a great many accounts, above it. At the end of that year, when the industry handed out its awards, The Witcher 3 was named Game of the Year, and the studio that built it, the whole village of them, was named the best developer in the world. By its maker's own account, it will go on to become the most awarded game anyone had put out up to that point. Over the following year, they said their goodbyes to it, and gave Geralt, the character the studio had built its games around for nearly a decade, a proper and final send-off. And then The Witcher was done, and Konrad had pulled it off. The kid, who had once typed games into a computer by hand, had directed one of the most acclaimed games ever made. And even at the very end, with 200 people on the team, he knew every single one of them by their first name and their last. That was the thing about a village. You could still know everyone in it. The studio was already turning to the next thing. A science fiction city, the most ambitious thing anyone there had ever dreamed up. And it was going to take 500 people to build. And the one thing that made all of this work, a team small enough that he could know every face in it, was the thing 500 people would quietly take away. 500. He was never going to know all of their names.